Good afternoon, or perhaps good morning or good evening, depending on where you are. I'm Neri Fadigati, president of Archivio Giorgini, a no-profit organization, and Giovanni Battista Giorgini grandson. I would like to thank all of you for joining our conference, and obviously many thanks to all our guest lecturers. The event has been organized with University of Bologna. Professor Daniela Calanca gave us the input to start. She is here with me, so thank you very much, Daniela. We have worked in collaboration with Association OMA, Osservatorio dei Mestieri d'Arte. I thank Pilar Lebole, project manager of OMA. OMA supported many projects based on our materials. 10 years ago, they published a book on Giorgini. In 2019, we held a conference. At the moment, we are cataloging a large portion of the documents in the archive. They are stored and available to scholars under the name of Fondo Giorgini della Moda Italiana at the Archivio di Stato di Firenze. I thank the director, Sabina Magrini. OMA is part of Fondazione Cassa di Risparmio di Firenze. So many thanks to the foundation and to their president, Luigi Salvadori, and to all the staff we have had the pleasure of working with. The conference is under the auspices of Centro di Firenze per la Moda Italiana. I thank the president, Antonella Manzi, and Alberto Scaccioni, Secretary General, and also Comune di Firenze e Regione Toscana. I would also like to thank Antonella Moulet for advertising this event on the Italian Ministry of Cultural Heritage website, and Raffaello Napoleone, CEO of Pitti Immagine, for posting the link to this conference on Pitti Connect. For us, it is already a success to be on both the Italian Ministry of Cultural Heritage and the Pitti Connect websites. It means we have been able to put together culture and economy, past and present. This is the primary goal of the Archivio Giorgini. Next June, edition number 100 of Pitti Uomo will be held. We are very glad to give our small contribution to the celebration on this very special year. I take the opportunity to remind you of the anniversary of the unification of Italy. This long process was concluded on March the 17th, 1861, 160 years ago. In that occasion, a Giovanni Battista Giorgini, ancestor of my grandfather, was involved as the lawmaker who wrote and read the acts. I warmly thank Gruppo Editoriale and Matteo Parigi Bini for all their generous help. We are working on another project, which we hope we will be able to present next June. A special thank you to our kind host Luca Mariani, CEO of Unisters. I am speaking to you from the beautiful ballroom of Villa Torrigiani, shown in the video you have seen before, where Giorgini lived and where the first Italian high fashion show was held on February the 12th, 1951, 70 years ago. Today, this is the main office of Unisters, so it continues to be a location from where Made in Italy goes out to the world. I also thank Roberto Capucci for allowing us to use one of his drawings as our logo. Last but not least, I would like to thank Vieri, Vanni, and all the Torrigianis. Together, we decided to let Giovanni Battista Giorgini open the conference. So I asked the director, and thank you for your help, to transmit a short interview made in this room in 1961.
«1950. Mi occorse quasi tutto l'anno, durante il quale feci frequenti visite a Milano, a Roma, nelle varie città d'Italia, per trovare delle giovani case di moda che volessero seguirmi in questa mia iniziativa. Finalmente riuscii a mettere insieme 10. Ciascuna doveva farmi 18 modelli. Volevo mostrarli all'inizio del 51, quando appunto Parigi in quell'epoca mostrava la prima settimana di febbraio, e io speravo di riuscire a convincere i compratori delle case americane che io rappresentavo a venire a Firenze dopo Parigi. Vennero qui, in casa mia, l'indomani mattina, e proprio in questa stanza qua io feci questa prima sfilata. Naturalmente io ero in un angolo della sala col cuore che mi batteva in gola. Questi compratori esperti di moda venivano da Parigi, avevano visto tutte le collezioni già a Parigi, questo era il giorno dopo, proprio non potevo vedere dalle loro espressioni se questa collezione piaceva o non piaceva. Terminata la sfilata, mi avvicinai a questo gruppo di compratori per sapere qual era la loro reazione. Entusiasti. Questo gruppo di 5 compratori americani, che erano nomi molto importanti, tornarono in America con un tale entusiasmo che quando feci la seconda sfilata, organizzai la seconda presentazione della moda italiana, vennero giù dall'America in 300 fra compratori e stampa. Il numero fu tale che io fui costretto a chiedere l'uso della Sala Bianca in Palazzo Pitti per poter contenere tutta questa folla di compratori che ci arrivava e pioveva da tutte le parti del mondo.
Produce Antonella Manzi, President of Centro di Firenze per la Moda Italiana. Thank you very much for your support. Please, Antonella, you may start.
Good afternoon. As chairman of the Centro di Firenze per la Moda Italiana, holding of Pitti Immagine, I'm honored to join this estimated forum today. Our association was founded in 1954 by the city of Florence and other territorial institutions, clearly inspired by the great work done by Giorgini during that period. My warm thanks to Neri Fatigati for this initiative, which we consider so important, not only to remember and celebrate the great value of Giorgini's contribution to Italian fashion, but also to reflect on his heritage and take inspiration from his extraordinary intuitions. Italian fashion first came to life in Florence in the 50s with him. Retracing his work, at least 3 features of Italian fashion from its origins to present-day times clearly emerge. First of all, an international vocation that immediately made Italian fashion stand out. At the time of Giorgini, the reference was mainly the rich, dynamic, and modern market of North America. This vocation, however, needed the support for a specific place that could provide concrete results. That place was Florence. Why Florence? Because Florence, along with Rome and Venice, had and has always been an iconic Italian city. It represents its culture, its beauty around the world. Because Florence had and has always had a network of artisanal workshops and small businesses that work in this kind of industry. Because, even before the war, Florence was the place where important international buying offices had their headquarters. We cannot even imagine fashion today without an international dimension. No opportunity can be built for our fashion industry if we do not think and project on a worldwide basis. And then a vocation for innovation of style, products, processes, in connection with an ever-changing cultural and social context. It's not by chance that this vocation emerged during the post-war period, and it looks like we're living in a similar perspective. But why in the 50s? Because post-war recovery encouraged a powerful and widespread desire to innovate economically, culturally, and in everyday life. Because the idea of fashion itself began to change at that time. It was no longer a possibility just for a few privileged ones, but it could increasingly become more accessible. It was no longer a traditional artisanal business, but an increasingly modern industrial activity. and it was no longer only a functional expression of the individual, but increasingly a cultural and communicative one. Between the 50s and the 60s, there was a gradual transition from the world of haute couture to that of prêt-à-porter, from the culture of the tailor to that of the stylist, from the individual artisanal workshop to the creation of different territorial districts and a complete industrial supply chain. Today, that industry needs to become even stronger, with an innovation that branches out into many interconnected trends, and with an extremely diversified public of end consumers, which sees that digitization of fundamental processes along its long and complex supply chain, and which considers ecological and social sustainability its main challenge. Last but not least, a vocation for the cultural and lifestyle dimension, which is still very strong. Culture, just like style and the overall life experience, of which fashion is one of the most efficient, creative, and popular languages. Giorgini managed to have a key role in this, thanks to his comprehensive experience as a buyer for the US market since the 30s. Why with Giorgini? Giorgini was a person who was knowledgeable, or at least had an intuitive understanding of these important combined processes of change. Giorgini was a man who marked the transition from one period to another. He was familiar with the North American market, with marketing and communication, and understood the psychology of its buyers. He knew he was selling not only clothing, improved wearability, functionality, and technical and creative quality at lower price, but also a new idea of fashion and the highest expression of culture, beauty, and well-being that a city like Florence and all of Italy can transmit. More than that, Giorgini was the first to intercept what was happening in the post-war North American society. Women involved in wartime efforts, who undertook an active role in factories, offices, and volunteer work, did their best to maintain this active profile even once the war was over, and their wardrobes needed to adapt to a new social life, so different from the past one. In this sense, the true competitiveness of Italian fashion when compared to French fashion, which had dominated the scene up until then, came out. France, which up to that time had been synonymous with international quality fashion, was less ready than we were to intercept these transformations. Plus, its fashion reference public was more limited due to higher costs for the North American market. In conclusion, from Giorgini we must learn the lively intelligence of change, dynamism, perseverance, and optimism, as well as the idea that fashion always evolves in connection to culture, art, and all the other creative languages and industrial sectors. As for those of us in Florence, standing strong is the idea that our city will always keep up with the spirit of modernity of which fashion is a herald. And I would like to leave you with a video contribution by the great John Fairchild, who can better than anyone in few words summarize what I just said. Thank you.
The modern woman is the big influence in fashion today. That has been the big influence. And Italian fashion is for the modern woman today. French fashion, you've got to go back when fashion was just really getting started after the war. Italian fashion has always been more modern than French fashion. And you've also got to consider that people always forget that Italian fashion is a dominant force because all the French designers have their fashion made in Italy. So really, Italian fashion has been a monopoly, has a monopoly on fashion. Florence is made in Italy. Florence is the city where people think in terms of the elegance and the modern Italian style.
Thank you, President Mansi. Thank you very much for your kind words and for the gift you made us showing this video. With a great pleasure now I present Mr. Luigi Salvadori, President of Fondazione Cassa di Risparmio di Firenze. Thank you, Mr. President, for both the help you give us and what the Foundation does for the entire city. Please, you may start.
Good morning, or evening, or afternoon to everybody. Thank you for inviting me to this important meeting regarding an event that left a truly indelible mark on the history of Italian fashion and the city of Florence. But I believe that as well as standing as an opportunity to remember a memorable event, this celebration, in times which continue to be so difficult for all of us, can be considered as a true symbol of recovery and rebirth. Although I am not a fashion expert, I know that the parade organized by Maestro Giorgini in Florence on the 12th of February of 1951 signaled the entry of a different style, a fresh and brightly colored style, far from the French haute couture, one that ruled the fashion world at that time. Today, therefore, we are not celebrating just a great personality. We are also celebrating the brilliance of a city and two areas of its economy: artisan manufacturing and fashion, which since then have united know-how, fine craftsmanship, style, elegance, and creativity in a balanced mix. All things that believe will never stop despite the pandemic. They create what will become made in Italy. All these qualities were magnificently represented by Fabiani, Simonetta, Germana Marucelli, and above all by Emilio Pucci, a great innovator. He was one of the first to accept Giorgini's challenge and to show in 1951 his Emilio line of fresh, modern clothing and sportswear immediately won over the American buyers interested in the boutique proposal that updated his business model with a combination of wearability and artistic craft flair. This is one of the reasons why our foundation has decided to promise, together with Intesa San Paolo, the Rinascimento Firenze project. Two of the project's 5 facilities are expressly dedicated to these two closely connected economic areas. And for the same reason, we have been collaborating with the Archivio Giorgini since 2011, when, on occasion of the 60th anniversary of the birth of Italian haute couture in Florence, our Osservatorio dei Mestieri d'Arte published Letizia Pagliai, Giovanni Battista Giorgini, Artigianato e Moda fra Italia e Stati Uniti, in which the author paints this illuminated ambassador of Made in Italy as a forerunner of the international buyer of that Italian excellence is the result of the talent and hard work of so many masters of the handmade, which had become reference point for Florentine export to the United States. Since that time, the Archivio Giorgini has never ceased to interact with the Fondazione CR Firenze, and in 2019, together with OMA and the Ministry of Cultural Heritage, commenced preliminary cataloging of unpublished materials and inaugurated a far-reaching and precious research effort with the collaboration of the University of Bologna. The research was explored and valorized and the meeting Artigianato e Moda a Firenze nelle carte inedite di Giovanni Battista Giorgini, meeting held at our foundation headquarters that same year. It was attended by many prestigious speakers, including Miss Stanfield, senior curator at the Victoria and Albert Museum, and an authoritative scholar of Made in Italy. And I am pleased to announce that today she is again with us. Our institution is firmly intentioned to continue its collaboration with Fondazione Giorgini. We sincerely hope that this year's dual anniversary, the 17th of the historic first fashion show and the 50th of the Maestro's death, will act as a stimulus to look to the future with enthusiasm and optimism, with the same enthusiasm and desire for ongoing renewal that fashion has always transmitted so efficaciously. Qualities that are absolutely necessary today in all areas of our economy if we all pursue the goal of restarting and reshaping our country. Thank you to all of you.
President Salvatori, we are very grateful for the collaboration you have so clearly resumed, and we hope we'll be able to do more things in the future. And thank you for joining us today. You gave us a bit of your time. Same, we are very honored because Cavalier Mario Boselli, Honorary President of the Camera Nazionale della Moda Italiana, National Chamber of Italian Fashion, gave us a bit of his time. He is here with us. And so, Cavalier Boselli, you may start, please.
Many thanks, President Fatigati. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friend, good afternoon, or maybe good day. I am really glad and proud, as honorary president of the Italian Fashion Chamber, to participate in this international conference that celebrates the 70th year of the first high fashion show with the memory of its creator, Giovanni Battista Giorgini. The date of February 12, 1951 is an important date for Italian fashion and for Italy itself, given the economic effect that the sector has generated and continues to generate in terms of turnover, trade balance surplus, and employment. The subtitle of the conference invitation says, "From artistic craftsmanship to high fashion." I have indeed always considered Giovanni Battista Giorgini the creator of a high-quality pret-à-porter, because the development they followed since the beginning of the 50s was the series production of clothes with a high contents of creativity and quality that has led to the impressive number we know. Just to define this beautiful reality, when I was the president of the National Chamber of Italian Fashion, I have issued for this kind of production the definition of il bello ben fatto, the beautiful well made, registered at SIAE on January 8, 2008. During my several trips around the world, particularly in the Far East and in China above all, on the many occasions when I had to illustrate the characteristic of Italian fashion and explain the reason of his success, I have always mentioned Giovanni Battista Giorgini and the date of February 12, 1951 as a milestone of the fashion phenomenon of our country. I end my speech with the hope that the name of Giovanni Battista Giorgini will be remembered by all operators in the fashion sector for what he did with great vision and foresight 70 years ago. Viva Giambattista Giorgini e viva la moda italiana. I leave the floor to Mr. Torrigiani. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cavalier Boselli. And I will say Viva l'Italia also, if I can. I think today you keep on the Italian flag. You keep on talking about made in Italy around the world. So Giorgini still today has somebody who does what he did very, very well. And I thank you for this. And I thank you for your kind words too. Thank you. And I also would like to remember another eminent figure in the Italian fashion system and a good friend of the Giorgini family, Beppe Modenese, who passed away a few months ago. Now, forgive me if I'm speaking again, just a few words to introduce the lecturers. So, few more minutes, I ask you to be patient, please. I just would like to explain the title we gave to the conference in order to create a context for all the lecturers. Giovanni Battista Giorgini is known as the man who started Italian fashion as a system. We are trying to move forward with this idea. We would like to introduce him as a man who did a lot for Italian handicrafts and made in Italy in general since the 1920s. We would like to demonstrate that fashion came about as a form of craftsmanship. Furthermore, we would like to explain that thanks to fashion and much more, Italy has been able to promote what has been called soft power. Soft power is a geopolitical theory started by US President Woodrow Wilson in 1911. Most certainly, during the 19th century and still active today, the US has the capability to export not just consumer items, but a way of life. There are just a few countries that can do something similar. I think Italy is one of them. Art, architecture, culture, landscape, music, opera, craftsmanship, design, contemporary art, cinema, fashion, sport cars and motorcycles, food and wine. We were a model for elegance in the 1950s and again in the 1980s, when fashion became a big industry thanks to firms like Armani, Versace, and many others. The Slow Food Association, started in 1986 by Carlo Petrini, has been the biggest counter-argument to American fast food. Slow food has 200 chapters in the United States, and it is not just about good food. The most important US institutional buildings have been built with reference to the classic style introduced by the Italian architect Andrea Palladio. From the 18th century onward, Italy has been a place to go to look for beauty. Beauty is not merely a function of aesthetic. As Cavalier Boselli said, we think beauty is a key word in this history. Beauty is an all-encompassing expression that is played out in the way one lives. In Italian, we have an expression explaining this. We say vincere in bellezza, winning in beauty. A win in bellezza is a win that is not easy, even though it may look easy. It's a win you can only say good things about. I think Giovanni Battista Giorgini knew how to enjoy life with beauty at his centerpiece. He was able to transmit this feeling to his many international clients. This was the secret of his success. He knew that there was and is an Italian lifestyle with an enormous potential, and Italy must be able to showcase it and export it.
I would like to say in the first place that I feel honored to be here on behalf of the University of Bologna in this magnificent site, historical so important and decisive for the momentous outcome for the event that we are here to celebrate. It's my great pleasure to express you the welcoming address of the chair of my department, Professor Claudio Stefanelli, and the director of its International Center of Fashion and Communication, Professor Federica Muzzarelli. In my function here of scientific coordinator of the current research project in collaboration with the Foundation Archivio Giorgini and its director, Dr. Neri Fadigati. And I would also like to thank personally, and not only on behalf of the University of Bologna, all the sponsoring organizations of the present conference. Then, in the second place, the Giorgini's archive is known as being declared of considerable national historical importance. But until now, the only documents that have been studied are those on Italian fashion, from 1951 to 1965. I have the honor and privilege of studying in preview all the unpublished historical material of the Giorgini's archive. So I wish to express my gratitude to Mr. Dr. Fatigati. Thank you so much, Neri, with my heart. So, the analysis of the documents in the Giorgini's archives offers unprecedented research opportunities related to the development of artistic craftsmanship and to the importance of trade in international relations during the 20th century. In particular, from the point of view of contemporary historiography, this document that covers the chronological period from the end of the 18th century to the year 1971 make it possible to identify the political, economic, and cultural relations between the United States and Italy in the course of the last century. It's a historical arc of special importance because from a documentary point of view, we find all the documents of Giorgini's activity and all the original American documents. Not only, these documents make it possible to reconstruct, on the one hand, the relations between Italy and the US, starting from 1924, and on the other hand, the relations that, together with Italy and the United States, are intertwined with Germany, France, Spain, and England in Europe, and in the East in Japan. We find all the original documents of these international relations. So, my research is underway, but I can already officially confirm that this archive contains extraordinary fundamental historical documents. And this thanks to Giorgini's activity. In this sense, in my perspective, it's necessary a depth study on Giorgini's activities, because these activities are a crucial part of the international relation framework of global history. Giorgini was farsighted. His activity falls within the framework of international relations. He acted in international geopolitical framework for the development of Italy. He has built a founding relationship with the American and Italian governments, with American banks in connections with embassies and all political and economic and diplomatic bodies, which these realities which played a fundamental role. Therefore, in my perspective, studying Giorgini's activity means studying craftsmanship and fashion, made in Italy, yes, of course, but within issues of greater national and international historical importance. In fact, there are many open questions, as say contemporary historians. Well, I say, with Giorgini archive, you can study these questions and offer unprecedented research opportunities. So, in this time, I can only summarize some key moments based on the documents I'm studying. The first phase, the activities and relations between Giorgini, of course, and the United States. I mean relation with the Italian government, the American government, the Italian and American embassies, American buyers, of course, from 1924 to 1946, from Giorgini's first trip to the United States to the constitution of the Allied Forces gift shop in Florence, 1944-1946. In this phase, Giorgini, Giovanni Battista Giorgini, managed relations between American buyers, the American government, and the fascist government. In particular, the crisis of 1929, the economic and political recovery, and the geopolitical basis for the constitution for the Allied Forces gift shop is created in the first phase. It's a crucial importance, this phase. Second phase, I mean, about Giorgini's activities, the transition from craftsmanship to fashion between 1947 to 1951. Here, there are many open questions. In my perspective, this phase is fundamental to understand not only in general the Marshall Plan, but also the negotiation that Giorgini conducts for craftsmanship first, then for fashion. In my opinion, it was not just a specific question of fashion. In the third phase, we find the organization of fashion shows in Florence from 1951 to 1965. As we know, but we have to study the Giorgini's activities in agreement with the Americans and at the same time with European bodies, European governments. The documentation for this phase demonstrates how Giorgini and his staff, of course, act on a European level. While in Italy, there is a strong contrast between the various fashion bodies. We know. Not only. Particularly, during this phase, we find an expansion of Giorgini's international relation in agreement with the American government and the Italian government in the direction of Japan. At the moment, I can only say that in this case, too, Giorgini rules is crucial. He is at the center of Italian relation and of international cooperation between the United States and Japan. Shortly, on 10th December 1963, in Florence, a joint stock company called Lucrezia was established. The name was in honor of the mother of Lorenzo il Magnifico. I say in Italian, Lorenzo il Magnifico, of the Medicis family. In Japanese, the name was Lucrezia Kabushiki Kaisha, with the expression in English, I Fashion House. I Fashion House. It was created in collaboration with Isetan Company, a major department store in Japan, in Tokyo, in particular in Tokyo, with Asahi Chemical Industries. The house of Lucrezia was located in ancient Palazzo of the Principe Corsini. So, in a Japanese document of April 1965, with the English translation alongside, we read, Lucrezia is a high fashion house, was opened in Florence in December 1963. Lucrezia was created in collaboration with a Japanese and Italian group. The capital being put by the Japanese concern Isetan Department Store and Asahi Chemical Industries. The creation of this farm was the idea of the late Mr. Majima, the chief of the Isetan department store. Whose constant desire was to unite the Japanese with the Italian world fashion. Since its opening, I read, Lucrezia has shown its boutique and ready-to-wear collection, both in private and public, such as at the Pitti Palace Italian Fashion Show. The market of these clothes has become worldwide. The specialties are made to order, boutique and ready-to-wear clothes. So, the Giorgini activity in relation with Japan also includes, in this case, the directives of the Italian government and the American government. Giorgini is again at the center of the management of an international geopolitical plan. For example, on the one hand, the Italian government finances the Italian fashion shows in Japan and in Hong Kong in 1965. And on the other hand, the US government manages the financial transactions of Lucrezia between Italy and Japan with Lucrezia. This is the summary vision of what is coming out of the Giorgini's archives in my study. On this basis, we can understand why Giorgini has been defined by the national and international press as a national hero. Yes, you can understand. I read the Washington Post, for example, March 1956. Today, the fashion-minded American woman rattles on gaily about Veneziani, Fabiani, Capucci, Simonetta, and other names in the Italian couture with the same respect she accords to the big names in the French couture. This wasn't always so. In fact, it's quite a recent development and represents the victory of one man against the fashion wars of two continents. The man is Giorgini, and yesterday members of the Washington Fashion Group at the monthly luncheon heard Giorgini's story of how almost single-handedly he put the Italian couture in the fashion man. So, it's a short example. In international and national press we read the important definition of the work and the state of Giorgini. In Gazzetta del Mezzogiorno, for example, we read Giorgini is a national hero of the launch of Italian fashion on the foreign market. So, for example, the Sunday Times London in January 1959, we can read, the 7th Italian fashion show it's a monument to the energy and vision of one man, Giovanni Battista Giorgini. So, finally, it wasn't, in my opinion, just journalistic rhetoric, because Giorgini's activities translate it into an economic perspective. We know present a big economic data. I don't repeat this economic data. We know, and it wasn't just journalistic rhetoric, because Giorgini and international press agencies acted in close collaboration with the Italian embassy, the European embassies, and the American embassies under the directives of specific governments. So Giorgini directs, and his staff, of course, directs relation with the following newspaper, for example, in US, in Brazil, in Argentina, in Great Britain, in Holland, in Germany. We find in the Giorgini's archive all documents for of the work in the relation of Giorgini. Okay, so in this sense, finally, we can define nowadays Giorgini as ambassador of Made in Italy. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Daniela. Great lecture. Now I introduce with great pleasure Professor Simona Maria Segre-Reinach, University of Bologna, the global reach of Italian fashion.
I wish to thank Dr. Neri Fadrigati and Professor Daniela Calanca for kindly inviting me to join such an interesting conference. The title of my presentation is The Global Reach of Italian Fashion. I will address the case of Vicky. Please, can you show the images of my presentation? Thank you. Italians are great travelers. They always have been. Italian fashion itself started as a traveling fashion. The celebration of Giovanni Battista Giorgini today aims precisely to give the historical relevance of an event that wasn't just an episode, but the result of long and established relations with the US, and most of all, of an international attitude. Some narratives around the different processes of emancipation from Paris fashion deserve to be scrutinized in a more nuanced narratives. The case on Cisterns and then couturière Elvira Leonardi Bouilleur, 1906-1999, also known as Vicky, offers one of those narratives. First, she had an ambivalent relation with France from the beginning. Second, as soon as Elvira Leonardi became Vicky, I will return to her nickname in a minute, France and US were both parts of her amazing history, and so it was Europe and later Asia, Australia, South Africa, Canada. She signed one of the first joint ventures in Asia in the history of Italian fashion with a Japanese company for Pret-a-Porter in 1969, and before a license agreement with Helena Rubinstein in 1957. Third, she designed clothes for an international elite, besides being the Milanese high society favorite. I can just mention Esther Williams, Farah Diba, Ira Fürstenberg, Grace of Monaco, Lucia Bosé, and many others. Apparently, Marilyn Monroe also bought one Vicky dress in New York. Last but not least, she started her activity in the 30s, and her atelier closed down in the late 80s. She started much before Italian fashion was recognized as such, and the international links that ended up in the great event of 1951 Florence are all evident in her archive. I researched Vicky's archive, which is Milano-based, for 2 years. Vicky's legacy is made up of personal relationships with the already highly internationalized world of fashion. Her memory cast light to the global dynamics of her career. But who was Elvira Leonardi Bouyer? She was the step-granddaughter of the Italian opera composer Giacomo Puccini, who gave her the nickname Vicky from Birichina, the mischievous one, which was later shortened in Vicky. A member of the upper class, Vicky wanted a real career in a time where women of her social class did not work. She never missed a step. After grandfather Giacomo Puccini came poet Gabriele D'Annunzio, who suggested the name of her first collection of nightgowns, Domina. He also bought some outfits for one of his lovers and never paid for it. And for her, the name Vicky, with an exotic key. Milano was unquestionably the city she loved most, but Paris was her point of reference. I quote, "In Paris, I learned everything, to have a weak voice, but one that could at times be provocative, a gaze that was directly appealing, supreme elegance of my gestures, walking, the refined movement of the fingers, the ability to show both warmth and aloofness, vulnerability and severity." During the war, thanks to her husband, the French antiquarian Robert Bouyer, Vicky continued to have contacts with French fashion, despite the fascist laws on the matter. In 1941, the year of autarkic clothing textile show, Robert sent her many letters from France with a list of item accessories, objects and fabrics to send and supply her boutiques. She had married Robert in Milano 1936 in a Lucien Lelon haute couture dress. Her dress was published on Vogue America. Before the 50s, she showed in Zurich at the Grand Hotel d'Older, 1946, in Venice at Lido Hotel, and many other places, but also bought a lot of clothes from Paris to copy, adapt, imitate, sell to her clients. She ordered her first from Jean Lanvin. In 1951, Paris Match devoted 3 pages to Vicky as La Vicky, la meilleure cliente de la mode française, a dressmaker, they wrote, who buy more than the Americans. More than 50% of her clothes came from Paris. But she always stated the need to create an Italian style. The Sala Bianca event, although she did not participate in the first place, was to affect her attitude very soon. After the war, mid-50s and 60s, she consolidated Milanese style, no longer imitating or purchasing French haute couture. French couture came to her anyway, through her son-in-law, the couturier Alain Renaud, who worked in Paris with Jacques Fath and in New York with Maurice Rentner. Vicky met Alain Renaud in Venice in occasion of the Bestegui Ball Oriental in 1951, also known as the Ball of the Century. He was introduced to her by her close friend Jacques Fath, costumed as Sun King for the occasion. The costume parting guests included Aga Khan III, Orson Welles, Cecil Beaton, who made photographic portraits of the party, Christian Dior, Salvatore Dali, King Farouk, and many other celebrities of the time. Alain left Fath and Paris and married Roberta, Vicky's daughter, in Milano in 1957. The wedding party at Palazzo Crespi in Milano was reported in detail by Women's Wear Daily, slim prints at Milan wedding celebration. The wedding dress of Roberta was the last piece coming from the Maison Fath, designed by Geneviève Fath. The global reach of Beaky actually came from Maria Callas, who was probably Beaky's most famous client. Beaky and Alain designed most of the Callas outfits, and the Callas World Tour in the 50s contributing to reinforcing the fame of Beaky Maison, especially in the States. I quote a letter from Meneghini, Callas' husband, 1954. The concert is one of those things that made history and will continue to make history here. Your fashions, Beaky, are greatly admired, skillfully and sumptuously worn by an exceptional mannequin. This has been your experience and yours alone. And I also read in the solemnly slender Corriere della Sera that in Paris, dressmakers are inspired by the clothes worn by Maria at the opera. Excellent, great success here as well, and at a little cost. You deserve such success because you are Beaky. In 1958, Maria Callas' secretary wrote to Beaky from Atlanta in the United States. The Signora is well and achieving great success, not just as an artist, but also as concerns the elegance and exquisite taste of her outfits, which are greatly admired everywhere. The conquest of America, of course, unites Beaky and many other Italian designers after the war. Her first trip took place in April 1952, a year after Giorgini's famous fashion show, in the company of her husband Robert and of Paulette. It was on the occasion of the first April in Paris ball held at the Waldorf Astoria. Beaky stayed there for a few months. She traveled by plane to get there, but returned first class on the famous Queen Elizabeth, sailing from New York to Dover. In New York, she stayed at the Hotel Gladstone. She had lots of friends in the city, including the journalist Elsa Maxwell, who was renowned for her parties, and she kept up her day-to-day correspondence with friends, clients, and acquaintances during and after her trip. They were the ones who purchased her models, gave her new ideas to take back to Europe, record albums, and even bedroom slippers. The trip was a huge success. Beaky kept a detailed diary on Hotel Gladstone letterhead, in which she jotted down every appointment: lunch with Fat and with Bettina Ballard, at home with Wasserman, each person she met, lunch with Dorothy Wallace, tea with Rita Hayworth, every possible deal in the making, an appointment with the chairman of Bloomingdale's, in the morning with her client Simpson, until it was time to go to bed. Beaky spent time in the best local fashion spots. One picture shows her at the Mouchesel, accompanied by the baron and designer Philippe Tournay, and she familiarized with the new consumer culture that characterized the United States. What impressed you the most about New York? She was asked during a radio show in 1952. 3 things: the city lights, which are fabulous, hard to describe, because they make you feel like you are in an enchanted city, or, as you Americans put it, in a fairyland. Then the women, who are very beautiful and miraculous, know how to put off getting old. The 3rd thing is the shop windows, the loveliest in the world. What splendor, what art. The truth of the matter is that America was not an easy market, in spite of the enthusiasm declared by its citizens when it came to Italian fashion, and not just because of their rivalry with the French. It took a lot of hard work for Beaky to be able to conquer the American market. She was again in New York in 1953. And then Beaky planned another business trip to America a few years later. You have to get ready for your new trip in the land of skyscrapers, a friend of hers wrote from Paris in 1956. N'oublie pas ton tailleur de Balenciaga, le chapeau fat, le parapluie Védrin, les escarpins Ferragamo et les visons Dior. But Vicky had something more in mind than just showing off her elegance in America. Her high-level contacts were supposed to turn into lucrative contracts. Yet, she wasn't entirely successful. A few years later, a friend of hers asked her on numerous occasions to come again back to New York. Bear in mind, he said, that Simonetta has arrived and that we have had several parties in her honor. Curiel will instead be here in the middle of the month. It irks me to know that everyone in this country is making tons of dough except for you, even though you are number one. The fancy name Berthold Goodman, America's most famous high-scale department store, often comes up in the correspondence. Vicky can't seem to place some blouses, which nonetheless prove quite successful, especially the ones with the Ravenna mosaic, but apparently a bit too expensive. Whatever the case may be, in 1958, Vicky was on the cover of the Women's Wear Daily. In 1959, the Griffith Garment Company suggested that Vicky import their patented bra straps to Italy, enclosing a sample, while Marcel Wagner gloves, after seeing Vicky designs published in the New York Times, offered to supply her with gloves. From the 1960s, Vicky's trips to America became more regular, more organized, and more successful. She would go to New York twice a year, in April and May, and then again in September and October. She started up a fur business with Ralph Kaufman, Old Seals and Company, and in 1959 she was about to launch American Vicky Incorporated, a joint venture between her and the textile manufacturer Neiman Marcus. Vicky's climb to the top of the international charts continued. In 1967, she was in Washington and in Boston to present her collections at an event dedicated to high fashion. After that, she was at an award ceremony for Italian knitwear in New York for the Italian weekly journal Amica. Those were years of traveling and intense activity involving the Italian car manufacturer Fiat as well, which organized presentations of Italian fashion around the world, Greece, Sweden, Canada, that always included Vicky. These countries were followed by Australia and Japan. I want to finish my presentation with a quote of scholar Vittoria Caratozzolo about the dressmakers that went internationally at the time, and especially about Vicky. These dressmakers were part, unquote, of that exportation of fantasies linked to various lifestyles that was no longer, in the 50s, handed over to the mere, albeit sophisticated technology of the outfit from the most recent collection. With the rise in intercontinental travel, Italian fashion is now exported along with the image of the celebrity of culture and high society. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Segre, for your very interesting lecture. I welcome Dr. Gianluigi Di Giangirolamo, Université Paris 1, Panthéon-Sorbonne. The title of his lecture is The Race Between Italy and France for the American Market. Please, Gianluigi, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Neri. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased, and it's a great privilege for me as a scholar, as an Italian, and finally as a Tuscan, to take part in the celebration of the 70th anniversary of the high fashion of the 17th anniversary of the high Italian fashion shows. For this reason, please allow me to say a sincere thank you to Neri Fadigati and Daniela Calanca for the invitation. Thank you indeed. Thank you very much. As a researcher on the development of institutions, and in particular of cultural institutions, when I do my research, Florence, not by chance, always emerged with an important and powerful role. In the particular case we are discussing today, it's clearly thanks to Giorgini's work that Florence is once again on the international spotlight, and in this context, among the world's fashion capitals. And it's thanks to Giorgini efforts and skills that the role of Paris as the world's exclusive fashion capital was challenged for the first time, and more precisely when Florence and the Italian fashion became the first competitor in the post-war race for the American market. The fashion shows organized by Giovanni Battista Giorgini in 1951, which we are celebrating together today, marked the international affirmation of Italy by recording considerable interest by the American market. Its Italian high fashion shows contribute definitively to the affirmation of the idea of Italian fashion and its emancipation from French fashion. The success of these events is due to Giorgini's vision and expertise. Our dear entrepreneur is a deep knower of the United States, thanks to his travels and businesses, relationships undertaken since 1924 as a promoter of the Italian craftsmanship in North America. So after World War II, his experience supports his awareness of the strategic role that the American market can have for the Italian creations and for the promotion of Made in Italy brands. Indeed, one of the Giorgini's greatest merits is that of placing high fashion, unique pieces on the catwalk together with the boutique fashion and crafted garments made in small series, probably considered a lesser production, but a perfect response to American taste. Alongside the style and the suitability of the models presented in Florence, emphasis is also placed on Italy's cultural heritage by hosting events with references to Florentine history in celebrating the splendor of the Renaissance courts, indeed making the creation on display more appealing to foreign buyers. Florence and the garments presented at Villa Torrigiani are becoming new players on the international fashion scenario. A real blast for Paris, as the French newspaper headlined in summer 1951, calling these events the Bombe of Florence. The title La Bombe de Florence a emballé les salons. The Italian issue was so preeminent that it was brought to the attention of Paris City Council at its meeting on 26 November 1951. The councillor's warning was highlighted in an article published in Les Echos on the 12 October 1951. It was wrote, Italian haute couture has launched a huge offensive against the competitors, taking advantage of the difficulties of the Paris Maison and aiming to take their place on the American market. French observers are worried about the activities of Giovanni Battista Giorgini, and they define him the man who introduced vermouth and Italian straw hats to the United States and who has become the #1 enemy of Parisian fashion. According to French newspapers, Giorgini has been able to attract the attention of the American market and the most influential American journalists, such as, for example, Carmel Snow and Bettina Ballard. The presentation of the winter collection held in Florence put in danger the French tailor's exclusive power. Italian creations began to attract the attention of French public opinion and put Italy as a truly competitor in the international fashion market. We have to say that Giorgini's presentation are part of the action in the field of fashion that begin with the end of the war in both Italy and France, and led to the birth of an Italian fashion on the one hand, and so at the same time the defense of the French haute couture tradition on the other, with a program of public and private interventions. And these can be considered relevant events that outline the definition of the respective fashion systems, defining the new boundaries of fashion sector, a sector of considerable importance and interest from an economic, political, and cultural point of view. This, we can say, can be considered a key period, above all in Italy, during which there are laid the foundations for the creation of a veritable national market, which was the prelude to the country's rise to the highest levels of manufacturing productivity in the world. While in Paris, at the beginning of the 50s, there is a swinging return to the haute couture industry with the start of a system of public grants. In Italy, many feats are launched in the different cities, from north to south. An interest in fashion is evident, especially in Florence, that is able to achieve an international success that had not been reached by other Italian cities until then. And this made Florence the capital of Italian fashion at that time, particularly with regard to the United States. However, it must be said that in spite of the doubtless Florentine success, Italian fashion is still fragile, and moreover, since the end of the war, there have been a kind of very Italian competition typical of the contrasting model of development of the Italian nation, and which, as emerged from the analysis of the sources, compromises a unified management of fashion at central level. A multiplication of trade organization with the intention of filling the institutional void created by the abolition in 1946 of the Ente Nazionale della Moda, created by Mussolini in 1932. For instance, just to make an example, after 1951, there were up to 13 fashion organizations in Italy, from Venice to Palermo. All these various and sometimes mutually contradictory moves could put the country's management of the fashion industry in a difficult position in the eyes of the American buyers. As Marcello Egidi, commercial officer of the Italian consulate in New York, stated in his report in October 1951. He wrote, "The multitude of uncoordinated actions, the creation of conflicts or jealousies, could only create confusion or a sense of loss of confidence in American business circles, and seriously damage the so said goodwill that had been achieved for Italian creations." All this would be, of course, to the benefit of French fashion. In this mood of competition between the various interventions for fashion in Italy, Giorgini's events require official acknowledgement from the public sphere. Support for this came from the city's local authorities, such as the Provincial Tourist Board and the Florence City Council. The first official acknowledgement was given in 1953 when the Italian High Fashion Show received the patronage of the Ente Italiano della Moda, based in Turin, a form of recognition by the only institution at that time in the fashion sector in Italy that had a close link with the government as a state-accredited body for fashion. The patronage gives to Giorgini's events a primacy and a form of official status, also through the creation of an executive committee in Florence. However, The complete formalization for the Florence events took place with the establishment of the Centro di Firenze per la Moda Italiana, founded in 1954. This is an initiative promoted by Giorgini with the local authorities of the town. According to his statute, the aim of this organization was to promote and enhance Italian fashion in all its aspects, with particular regards to events and presentations for international buyers. The City of Florence, the Chamber of Commerce, the Industrial Association, and the Tourist Board all participate in the establishment of the center. The body was set up mainly for the organization of the presentation at Palazzo Pitti, but is also a formalization through the support of the local public bodies of what have been achieved in the previous years on a national, but especially international level. What happened in the meanwhile? Of course, the pluralism of institutions is going on in Italy. The case of Rome is significant, where the local authorities of the Italian capital, strong in the success of the events held in Rome and aware of the importance of haute couture for the local economy, set up a new organization. It was called the Centro Romano per l'Alta Moda Italiana. Founded on November 1954, this center would play an important role together with the Florence one in laying the foundation of the Camera Nazionale della Moda Italiana. The initiative was born with the support of the Chamber of Commerce, the provincial administration, the Tourist Board, the Municipality of Rome, and the Roman-Italian Union Trade of High Fashion. Which is the next institutional step? The next institutional step takes place in the capital, in Rome, at the end of the 50s, with the first proposal for an agreement between the centers of Florence and Rome. The aim of the two organizations is to establish a unified front on the model of the Parisian Chambre Syndicale. This led to the creation of the Camera Sindacale della Moda Italiana in 1958. The founding act of the association was signed by the haute couture houses of Rome, Florence, and Milan, such as Roberto Capucci, Alberto Fabiani, Cesare Guidi, Emilio Schubert, Simonetta Colonna, and Iole Veleziani, as well as the representative of the two centers, Giovanni Battista Giorgini, Pietro Parisio, and Francesco Borrello. The new organization goal is to defend, protect, enhance, and manage the Italian fashion sector, and to coordinate fashion events both in Italy and abroad. This project, nevertheless, remained at a standstill for a few years, and at the beginning of the 60s, Paris became a center of attraction for some of the most famous Italian fashion designers, such as Capucci, Simonetta Colonna, and her husband Fabiani, who decided to leave Italy to present their creation across the Alps. This escape, called Capriccio Francese by the Espresso magazine, caused some concern both from a political point of view and from the two centers of Rome and Florence, as well as filling the pages of the major newspapers and specialized magazines for several months. This phenomenon has certainly made public opinion and institutions aware of the problems of the Italian fashion at that time, in particular, the need for an institution to protect the sector and for the Italian government to play a concrete role. In the spring of 1962, the main players in the Italian fashion industry, including, of course, our Giorgini, were involved in defining the National Chamber, starting a founding process, and this restoring the project of Camera Sindacale della Moda Italiana, founded in 1958. In this way, The task of setting up the National Chamber is officially entrusted to the centers of Rome, Florence, Milan, and Naples, together with the respective chambers of commerce, in anticipation of later extending participation, of course, to other interested institutions. The official constitution of the Camera Nazionale della Moda Italiana takes place on the 29th September 1962, giving birth to the association, which is still nowadays the first point of reference for all fashion initiatives in Italy. The recently established Camera Nazionale can certainly be considered to have actively attracted the attention of the Italian government to fashion issues. One of the objectives promoted and affirmed in the institution's documents is to promote an Italian fashion policy. And this marks the start of a collaboration with the Ministry of Foreign Trade with the aim of promoting Italian fashion abroad and setting up the relevant advertising campaigns. What was going on in Paris in the meantime? At the beginning of the 60s, our Camera Nazionale was setting up an organized system to promote Italian fashion abroad. Similarly, for its French sister organization, Chambre Syndicale de la Couture, it was essential to increase and develop the volume of exports to the outside world. And this is why it has already been working for a few years to enhance relations and promotion in the United States in particular. With this strategy in mind, on the 13th September 1957, the board of Chambre Syndicale decided to entrust the New York office of Gottlieb with an accurate survey of the American market. The study of this report, drawn up in 4 volumes, and the conclusion drawn by Gottlieb agency led the Chambre Syndicale to the decision to open its own office in New York. This institutional office in the United States had the task to defending the interests of Parisian couture on the ground and taking the necessary actions to increase sales of French models on the American market. Thanks to these exchanges, a series of promotional projects are put in place, such as the organization of a seasonal package trip in Paris to introduce French couture to American buyers, and among the various promotional campaigns, a color television program is also planned to present the new creations from Paris to the American public. On the commercial side, a passport couture for the use of buyers was created, intended to commercially strengthen relations between French couture and its American customers, or at least to facilitate relations between buyers and couturiers. The 1959 budget for promotional activities included the financing of the Chambre Syndicale representative office in New York, the participation in foreign trade fairs, intervention in foreign universities through conferences, scholarships, and contests, promotional events abroad, the production of promotional short films, and finally, intensive action for the international defense of copyright. For 1960, a proposal was presented for numerous Parisian couture events in the key cities of the American market. The aim is to directly show its product to the American public and strengthen the name of French couture as a leader in international fashion. In conclusion, we can say that the origin of the Italian fashion system can be placed in the process of democratization of the country and in a process of international endorsement of the Italian product and the international recognition of an Italian style, thanks to the work carried out by Giorgini, which puts the primary role played for a quite long time by Paris under warning, and for the first time under review, particularly from the point of view of competition on the foreign market, and more precisely on the US market. This condition imposed on Paris the need to look at Italy as a real competitor in the organization of measures aimed at taking over the significant part of the international market that was the United States. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very interesting, Gianluigi. I can say that a very important American journalist said, unfortunately, French fashion system doesn't have a Giorgini, because we work so well with Giorgini, they should have somebody like him. So thank you again, hope to see you soon. So Gianluca Bauzano, senior journalist at Corriere della Sera. The title of the lecture is From Artistic Handicraft to High Fashion.
Good evening, everybody. Now it's not afternoon, and really migrating to Neri Faticati, and I repeat, it's the soul of this project. And my talk, I would like to use my words to transmit my emotion, and I repeat my reflection about Giovanni Battista Giorgini, and also about that essential event that was first runway in Florence at a crucial moment, not only for the history of fashion, but I believe, I am sure, for the history of the Italian culture. London exterior day. A crowd of international media waiting outside the Victoria and Albert Museum. The doors are about to open to the preview of the glamour of Italian fashion. 1945-2014, held in April 2014. The first exhibition room catapults visitor back in the time to the 50s and to historic Sala Bianca in Florence, Palazzo Pitti. On the walls, huge blow-ups of period images transmit the magic of Maggie, 22nd July 1952. The Fade, London exterior, night, red carpet for the exhibition opening gala. A who's who for the Italian, the world fashion system in attendance, stylists and entrepreneurs, top model and the wizard of the fashion photo shoot. From the kingdom of the Queen Elizabeth, international recognition of made in Italy's essential value, not just a celebration of creativity, and exaltation of the wonders of the Italian saper fare. A close dialogue between manual skill and fine workmanship, a celebration of an Italian heritage, not an abstract celebration of a concept, but of if who created that concept with his capillary work, his intuition and his diplomacy. Marchese Giovanni Battista Giorgini. In 2014 in London, the spotlight came back up on the man who created the myth of the made in Italy. Here early in 1913, as a member of the scientific committee for another exhibition with a title that is still extremely topical, La rinascita, storie dell'Italia che ce l'ha fatta, I had looked to Giorgini as the linchpin of the section devoted to Italian fashion. The spectacular of intent of this and London project only points up Giorgini's value and his centrality. The world thus resumed talking about Giorgini. It had been more than 2 decades since the last time, since that 25th June 1992, when another exhibition event opened at Palazzo Strozzi in Florence, La Sala Bianca, nascita della moda italiana, it celebrated the first fashion show held in the Sala Bianca. The immediate and triumphantly crossed finish line of the virtuous project launches just a year early by Giorgini, when he staged the real first Italian fashion show on February 12, 1951 at the Villa Torrigiani. The event we are celebrating to date and a respectful 7 years distant in time was an amazing renaissance. A gauntlet thrown down to challenge the supremacy of the Paris runway, thanks to Giorgini's capacity to center the interest of the transatlantic buyer and the media on Italy. John Fairchild, publisher and former editor-in-chief of Women's Wear Daily, wrote that Giorgini more closely resembled a famous orchestra conductor than a fashion industry mover, that he took fashion by the hand and led it into a new world where men and women in bright clothing rode on Vespas, clinging to each other, to strangely young and sexy in their Italian apparel, and that very soon fashion fell in love with that elegance. How did Giorgini manage to do all this in Italy, which in those years was clambering through the rubble left by World War II? The key lies is in the word of Giorgini's daughter, Matilde. Words that bring his personality and his accomplishment into finer focus. This Italianity, this faith of ours in basic virtues, intelligence, tradition, good workmanship, perfectly braided straw, the purity of embroidery were the weapons my father used to win success in his trade. In the 20s, when he began selling our image in the United States, America associated Italy with gangster and cardboard suitcased immigrants. There were more slammed in your face door than opens one. My father vowed to open them to sell our products, ceramics and table cloths, embroidered linens and articles made of straws, and also to contribute to shattering that other image and all the cliché. He did the same after World War II in an Italy that was broken and viewed auspically of the world stage. Saint of a noble family, Giorgini was a blend of patriotic spirit and a human generosity, an able and intuitive entrepreneur. From his native Versilia in 1923, at age 24, after 2 years at his cousin's export office, he decided to strike out of his own. He was well aware of the potential of the export business and of the innate strength of Italian products. Made in Italy, ante litteram, is zeroed in on high quality craftsmanship. He passionately visited the workshop of the artisan he courted and wanted to understand in order to export a world in which technical know-how, artistic creativity, and manual skill were lays. Giorgini's edge lay in the fact that he never made a move thinking only at the short-term business result, but rather, and probably primarily, always kept his eye on a larger goal, to valorize and publicize the excellence of our artisan production on the foreign market. Excellence understood as the cultural legacy of the people. He scoured to entire peninsula. He created a catalog listing the best of glass and of lace, and embroidery and ceramic. He took it to the States. First, disappointment, then a few nibbles, finally success. Giorgini was not just a trade intermediary, but skilled creator of synergies. He returned from his trip charring drawing of the items his transatlantic clients wanted so that future Italian production could adapt. He reeled from the financial losses he suffered due to the 1929 Wall Street crash just as. Later, he came through the tragedy that was World War II. Giorgini returned to the fray in the post-war 40s, more determined than ever. He convinced the Italian fashion as a product, an image for export, a response to actually French creativity, on which everyone, especially the United States market, seemed to depend. Fashion, and in particular its artisan components, become a propulsive force in our country's economy. For the show of the Italian fashion in 1951, Marchese Giorgini installed a railway in the ballroom of Villa Torrigiani and set up a display of knitwear, accessory, and bijou. Italian saper fare, all of it was on stage. The event was not easy in the making. In the letter he sent to various Italian fashion houses a few months prior to that fateful 12 February 1951, Giorgini placed the accent on the planning aspect of kickstarting a sector with such enormous potential. He started off saying, "Since 1923, I have been in contact with the North American market, and I represent many of the most prestigious importers of our art and artisan product. We have never spoken of fashion in a practical sense, since Paris for them is its vital center. However, they have always had only high regard for our fashion accessory, bags, scarves, gloves, umbrellas, footwear, and jewelry. Since in this moment the United States is so benevolent towards Italy, it seems to me that the time has come for us to attempt to establish our fashion on their market." The curtain went up in 12 February 1951, inside the walls of the Villa Torrigiani aristocratic family home in Florence, Via dei Seragli 144. A group of illustrious Italian dressmaking houses presented their haute couture collection. 2 days later, the same address hosted a gala ball and a show of evening dresses. A sumptuous send-off of the American barrier and foreign press, a triumph. The invitees were completely won over by the inimitable union of creativity and the social graces, of elegance and hospitality. This is the typical of the Italian style, without forgetting the excellence of the fashion proposal. Nothing was left to change. In his invitation, Giorgini even specified that since the purpose of the evening is to promote Italian fashion, the ladies are sincerely requested to wear clothing of pure Italian inspiration. The success of the at-home debut was such that Giorgini was swamped by applications from ateliers all over Italy to participate in future events. Thus, the second edition in July 1951 was held in the roomier space of Florence Grand Hotel. On that occasion, beside his tenacity and his non-conformist streak, innate quality of the strength of which he had so often been able to succeed where others had not, Giorgini showed of another of his precious skill. He was a talent scout extraordinary with an open approach to young creativity. One such, when Giorgini discovered and ushered to his debut, was Roberto Capucci, little more than 20 at the time, and oh no. Capucci's telling of the story is compelling. 1951, and my atelier in Rome had been open for less than a year. Maria Foschini, a fashion journalist, had convinced me to do it. She had seen my drawing, hundreds and hundreds. I had graduated at Liceo Artistico, and for me, drawing, understood as fashion design, was my life, as it still is. My mother was against the idea of the atelier. I did everything almost in secret. acting in Via Sistina in Rome, a cutter, and 2 others. It was 1950s. Meanwhile, thanks to Giovanni Battista Giorgini, Italian fashion had begun to come to life and was going show in Florence. Bista, as he liked to be called, invited me after Maria Foschini had showed him my drawing, with which she fallen in love. No runway for me, so, since I was the new kid on the block and the big shot would have been method. Cappucci is talking about his future colleagues, from Carosa to Fabiani and Sorelle Fontana, from Simonetta to Maruccelli, from Veneziani to Noberasco and Vanna, the top names of Giorgini's at-home show. It was July 1951. I was supposed to present about 30 gowns during the ball at Villa Torrigiani on the closing night of the 2nd edition of the Florence event. I was supposed to be a surprise, but the big shot learned about it and without the idea and me. But in the end, they boomeranged. The next morning, Giorgini's home was full of photographers and journalists. He hadn't abandoned me. He had found a way to put my show on despite everything. The whole Cappucci's collection is sold out. I was 20. I have never forgotten Giorgini, how he took me under his wings. Most vividly, what they said to that kid I was then. He advised me to work the way I wanted to and to not let myself be influenced by market pressure or fear of working outside the mainstreams of fashion. Basically, that was the advice I followed when I decided to leave the fashion system and present my collections must be seasonal. It was like being reborn. Today, the Roman couturier is universally known as the sculptor of silk and for his marvelous plissé creations. He was invited to the 1995 Venice Biennale. One of his models resided in Florence at the Fondazione Giorgini, established 20 years ago to celebrate the half-century anniversary of the 1951 show. Giorgini was the deus ex machina of Cappucci's debut and his myth, but also of a complex and now fundamental business system. It is estimated that by the time the 2nd edition went dark in July of 1951, the market for couture gown and fashion accessories hovered at around 100 million of that year's dollar. Giorgini saw a sterling opportunity and by the end of the summer had decided to export Italy's creation to the States and to present them at a fashion show organized for the occasion by the great department store of New York and Boston, Houston and Los Angeles. The results, another triumph. In January 1952, the 3rd edition of the Florence show thought of up exponential increases in sale, license and orders. Made in Italy fashion had grown into the role that Giorgini had wished for it. It had conquered the public and the markets, but as always happens, the enormous success of the operation had triggered, infected envy and grabs for the limelight. Giorgini did not lose earth and kept a firm hand on the tiller of the fashion system as they gated his through the storm of the early season. There was too much on the line. Made in Italy was not longer an abstract concept, it was a reality. The famous journalist Guido Vergani, who lived those years in first person, wrote, I look at the books in early 1958, revealing just how abundant were the fruits of that lengthy and intelligent work, driven by cohesive and often stubborn tenacity, by infinitive passions, in the face of jabs and snobs, and above all by a modern understanding of advertising and the media and the public relation as the capacity to create event, to capture the spotlight. Translated into a number, between 1950 and 1957, the turnover derived from the fledgling fashion system rose from 18 to 208 billion lire of the time. In a very few years, Italian style had set out from Florence, gone abroad and conquered the globe. Even Paris, also the haute couture that started in Florence fashion show, was reserved for a fortunate few. It was published by the actress, and the photographs of the stars of the silver screen in the glossy magazine became point of reference for all the women of the age. Many who saw the stars of the silver screen in the women's magazine longed to dress like them, like the starring antagonists, Sophia Loren and Gina Lollobrigida, in models by Schubert or Simonetta, or like the platinum Marilyn Monroe, who mix and match fashion and accessory by Roberto Capucci, Emilio Pucci, and Salvatore Ferragamo. Hollywood moved to the Tiber. Roman Holiday with Audrey Hepburn was shot in Rome in 1953. The costume by Edith Head, the queen of the Hollywood costume designers, won the Oscar. The movie made Italian style a planet-wide household word. Made in Italy did not reign solely in Rome. To the style exposed by Fellini's La Dolce Vita and Via Veneto, Milan responded with its preferred stage, the foyer of the Teatro alla Scala, as a runway for the creation of Germana Maruccelli, Gigliola Curiel, and Iole Veneziani, also Elvira Leonardi Poirier, known by the nickname of Beaky, who invented the Calla style, to whom the soprano turned to become La Divina. It was Beaky, Calla's trusted friend and advisor of 25 years standing, who created high fashion models for Calla's Paris debut on 19 December 1958 for the concert of the Opera, transmitted live on Eurovision to 12 countries and an audience of several hundred million viewers. Yves Saint Laurent phrased to red gown worn by Maria Callas. The Sistema Giorgini sailed before the wind into the 60s. At edition after edition, Giorgini filled the Florence runway with high fashion, and then Knetwear, Children fashion, and Force. Junior fashion was next, then intimated apparel, and 1963, men's fashion. The 60s were also the years of the ordination of Valentino Garavani. As with the Capucci's, Giorgini's intuition about Valentino was unerring. Valentino showed his first collection at the end of the 50s, but its true anointing came in 1961 at Rome. In 1962, over a decade after the first Sala Bianca event, Giorgini agreed to host a young Valentino in Florence. Society continued to change. The fashion sector protagonist demanded that the Sistema Giorgini also change, and radically. In 1965, Battista Giorgini terminated his adventure and left the helm of his creation to others. Florence adopted a different look. Pret-à-porter gained more and more ground. Haute couture retreated to Rome. Then came 1968, horrified by the rise of ready-to-wear fashion of the pret-à-porter wardrobe. Balenciaga closed his atelier. And in December, even the Teatro alla Scala foyer disappeared as Milan's elective runway for then Italian style that had gained renown and favor worldwide thanks to Giorgini. Verdi's Don Carlo was on the Scala stage on December 7th, but all the attention was on the square, on the violent student protest led by Mario Capanna. 3 years later, in 1971, Giorgini died. A statement by the father of the Italian fashion, made while he was still king of the Sala Bianca, encapsulated his precious legacy. Our task is therefore to start things moving, to attempt to invigorate them with unreserved dedication, because we must think of the young people who, tomorrow, we have substantiated this work of ours and feel encouraged to improve upon it. If we embrace these facts, the vote inflicted by small disappointment and false personal allegation will remain superficial, incapable of shaking that deep trust that gave us the strength to begin it all, and we hope will give them the strength to persevere so long as it will be right to do so. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Gianluca. Thank you for your patience. I hope to see you soon. Now I introduce another good friend of the Giorgini family, Sonnet Stanfield. Nice to see you, Sonnet.
It's good to be here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I do.
Okay, fantastic.
It's great, isn't it? I really welcome you, Sonnet Stanfield, Senior Curator Fashion at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. We are all grateful to Sonnet for the wonderful exhibition on Italian fashion she organized at the V&A Museum in 2014. Sonnet, we will speak about G.B. Giorgini, Fashion and Diplomacy, 1950-1955.
Thank you so much, Neri, and I'd like to thank you and also Daniela Kalenka for inviting me to join today. I'm so honored to be here among such distinguished speakers, and I am just so pleased to be here to join you in marking the 70th anniversary of the first Italian high fashion show conceived of by Mr. Giorgini. And my contribution today is to, I hope, add to what the other speakers have explored. Specifically, I'm interested in how the official channels of the American and Italian diplomatic corps supported and advanced Giorgini's efforts to promote Italian fashion in the first half of the 1950s by attending and also championing these events. I also feel very privileged to have had access to the papers of Giovanni Battista Giorgini in the Archivio Giorgini, and my research draws very heavily from this material. So with the next slide, you see on the screen an image advertising the fashion writings of the Los Angeles Times fashion editor, Faye Hammond. And I'd like to begin with a quote. In August of 1954, on the 2nd of August, 1954, Faye Hammond wrote in a letter these words: "The Paris collections are over, thank God. One smiles at people here, and the result is an icy stare. There must be some nice French people in Paris, but the haute couture is sadly lacking in them. I am missing my beloved Italy more than I can tell you, and if I had all the money that's going to be spent at dinner tonight, I'd go right over to TWA and buy a ticket back to Florence and the nicest people in the world." The recipient of this letter was Giovanni Battista Giorgini, who, as we know, his efforts starting in 1950, but really reaching back well before the Second World War, as other speakers today have clarified, who helped to create an organized and coordinated Italian fashion system with international impact, with Florence as its home base. And Giorgini's coordination really demonstrated his ability to influence key protagonists in this story: fashion designers, the international fashion press, retail buyers, and also the international diplomatic corps. The next image that you see is a group of a couple of examples of Giorgini's marketing approach. And as writers and academics like Carlo Marco Belfonte and others have written, Giorgini, using Renaissance imagery and references, created a marketing approach to promoting his events that really were ahead of his time. Now, some scholars are impatient with what they see as the so-called mythologizing of Giorgini's contributions, but really it's quite clear that Giorgini accomplished remarkable entrepreneurial success and order within Italy's then chaotic fashion landscape. So the focus of this talk, as I mentioned, is really the kind of Italian and American governmental collaborative effort to support Italian fashion, with particular reference to Florence, especially during the first half of the 1950s, a period when Italian fashion was used as a diplomatic tool, and as Neri mentioned at the beginning, a soft power symbol, which could further American interests on the European continent. Now I'm following on the footsteps of other scholars, including Elisabetta Merlot, who have investigated the business history of Italian fashion. So I wanted to note that. But really in the aftermath of the war, with a significant portion of the European Recovery Program or Marshall Plan aid went to reviving Italy's textile production, which had obvious links to fashion. And Nicola White has written really persuasively on this. Developing an Italian fashion industry was a focal point for the rehabilitation of Italy as a post-war American ideological ally and trading partner. It was also a key ingredient in keeping Italy outside of Moscow's orbit and aligned with US interests. So the next image you see is an image of an exhibition titled Italy at Work, which we've heard reference to. And Giorgini, of course, was heavily involved in this project. Really, it was one of the most important post-war American foreign policy efforts promoting Italian culture in the United States. So Italy at Work was supported by the ECA administration to Italy and various Italian governmental agencies. And it started its 12 museum tour in the US at the Brooklyn Museum in 1950. And it contained over 2,000 Italian artisanal objects, including furniture, leatherwork, strawwork, textiles, and women's accessories. And many of the makers whose products were included came from Giorgini's stable of Florentine craftspeople. The Italian ambassador to the United States attended the launch event on the 9th of November, 1950, and called the exhibition, quote, one of the results of friendship and cooperation that has been reestablished and developed to the present stage between our two countries in the last 5 years. And as is well known, Giorgini attempted to organize a series of live fashion shows of Italian designers within the American museums hosting this exhibition. And though that effort was unsuccessful, in the winter of 1950, harnessing his established network of Italian fashion designers who he had contacted with Italy at Work in mind, he brought them together and he drew upon also his contacts with North American department store buyers. That was the seed, the kernel that was planted for Giorgini to launch the first coordinated collective fashion show of the work of designers from across Italy, Florence, Milan, and Rome, very crucially attended by international fashion buyers and press. So the first event really was essentially a very hastily assembled experiment, but it was a gamble that resulted in the immediate establishment of the twice yearly internationally attended showings in Italy in one city, and that city was Florence. So the next image, you'll see an example of a few snapshots from this first show. And it's well established that we've discussed already multiple times today that it took place in the family apartment in Villa Torrigiani. And photos show, you can see on the screen, that the models were dressed in the back room and then accompanied by a pianist in the room. They paraded in front of guests who were seated in the sitting room, in the living room. And each designer presented, I think it was said earlier, around 18 ensembles, and they showed their work consequently one after another. So although the audience was small at that first event, it was deeply influential because Giorgini was able to draw upon his North American contacts that existed thanks to his efforts before the war. And for example, on the next slide, in the next image, you'll see one very influential buyer was John Nixon from Henry Morgan and Co. of Montreal, seated with Giorgini's daughter Matilda at the evening party. And in the next slide, you'll see that there are roughly several dozen guests seated there, watching the catwalk shows unfold. So word of this new style source quickly spread, and Bettina Ballard, the well-known fashion editor of American Vogue, wrote Giorgini in March of 1951, and she said, "I had very good reports of your show. Everyone seems very interested in Italy. Vogue is too, and I'm sure we can do something in the near future." The next image is another from Giorgini's first show, and his presentations were praised for being well organized and an efficient way for guests to see collections of designers from across Italy in one place. And these early presentations were notable for mixing couture and less formal clothing, which even included beachwear. I think you can just make out an example on the screen. And also for promoting, as we've heard earlier, a viable and less expensive alternative to Paris fashion. Hector Escoboza, who at this time was the director of the San Francisco department store I. Magnin, told Giorgini after this February 1951 event, he said, "Had we known what the Paris collections were going to show and what the Paris prices were going to be, we would have bought a lot more in Florence." It's no surprise that given Giorgini's connections to the Italy at Work exhibition, which was in effect a joint American and Italian government-supported advertisement for Italian design, the first Florence show was clearly on the radar of US and Italian government officials. The American Consul General to Florence from 1950 to 54 was Mr. Charles Reed. He attended Giorgini's first event in February 51 and wrote Giorgini to thank him, stating, "I received your letter enclosing 3 snapshots taken during the fashion show. I hasten to thank you for these souvenirs of a very enjoyable evening. Mrs. Reed and I are looking forward to the next fashion show, which will no doubt be as great, if not a greater success." The next image shows the American consulate, and I show it to you because Consular Reed became a key Giorgini ally. For the second fashion show in July of 1951, he offered up the consul premises for a cocktail party for special guests attending the fashion show. And he wrote to Giorgini, "Herewith are the invitations to the cocktail party, which Mrs. Reed and I are giving. I hope that a great number, if not all, will be able to come." So Giorgini would have appreciated that the diplomatic corps could facilitate contacts between Italian fashion designers and American buyers, kind of commercial brokering, if you will. And this was crucial because America was the largest foreign market for Italian designers, indeed, for all European fashion producers at this time. In the next image, you see a powerful triumvirate of American fashion attending the evening event at Giorgini's home, held in conjunction with the February 1951 event. From left to right, buyers Julia Trissel of Bergdorf Goodman, Gertrude Zeminski of B. Altman, and importer Hannah Troy. In the next image, you'll see it's a photograph of the Grand Hotel. Giorgini, ever the operator, in anticipation of larger audiences, arranged for the larger premises of the Grand Hotel for the July 1951 event. And in this next image, you see a fashion show invitation from that event. So American Consul General Reed wrote to Giorgini with compliments again after the July event, sending, quote, "my deep congratulations for the brilliant success of the Italian fashion show, a true manifestation of art and stylish atmosphere." So again, you see, not only is he continuing to show his support by attending the events, but also spreading kind of goodwill and complimenting Giorgini continually on his efforts. In the next image, I'll mention that, which shows Pucci beach and ski wear on the catwalk of the Grand Hotel. So in addition to Consul General Reed, also present at this July 1951 event was Alice G. Mulhern, who was the American commercial vice consul, who wrote to Giorgini after the July event to say, quote, "I thank you for giving me the possibility to see all events of the Italian fashion show. You have knowingly achieved the perfect organization of an initiative worthy of the most beautiful Florentine and Italian traditions." I think it's important to note that just as Giorgini's Florentine shows were becoming established, they encountered complications in the form of a revolt from some of the Roman designers. So by the January 52 event, Sorelle Fontana, Fabiani, and Simonetta defected, refusing to come to Florence and choosing to show in their own couture salons. And Sorelle Fontana were absent from then on, and Fabiani and Simonetta occasionally returned to show in Florence. But I think the main point was that this action forced guests to either increase their travel budgets to attend both the Florence or Roman showings or skip one of them. So this made the attendance of influential public figures like the diplomatic corps and the ambassadors all the more important. In the next image, you'll see an example of that. So the American diplomatic corps continued its strong support of the Florentine shows and Giorgini's efforts throughout the next half decade. American Ambassador Dunn and his wife attended the third Florence showing held in January 52 at the Grand Hotel, and American Consul General Charles Reed hosted another cocktail party at his home in their honor. Upon Mrs. Dunn's arrival, as you can see, she was publicly feted. She was seated in the place of honor next to Giorgini in the front row and was presented with the gift of a handbag. Ambassador Dunn and his wife must have had a delightful time because he wrote afterwards with great warmth that he, quote, "enjoyed it immensely." And he went on in his letter to Giorgini to indicate the economic significance of Italy's growing fashion industry. And he added, quote, "I very much appreciated having the opportunity to see such large and representative selections of the newest creations of Italy's fashion houses and artisans in one place. Please accept my warmest congratulations for having organized so well and so successfully this important contribution to the growing economic well-being of our country through the media of export sales." At the end of January 1952, Giorgini wrote in reply, quote, "Dear Mr. Dunn, your kind expressions are my most earnest reward to my work. Please do not thank me, but let me tell you again how grateful I am to you and Mrs. Dunn for having accepted my invitation to attend the fashion show. It really has been a great joy to have you both in Florence." I think it should be noted that Giorgini promoted the attendance of the American ambassador, which I think he must have realized could help add prestige to these events. He wrote to Harper's Bazaar editor Carmel Snow after the January 52 event, emphasizing the ambassador's support. He said, "I hope you enjoyed your stay in Rome, but certainly we missed your visit in Florence, where we had the pleasure of the ambassador and Mrs. Dunn and the reception at Palazzo Vecchio." In the next image, we have a wonderful photograph of the Sala Bianca, and as is well known to this audience, now with hundreds in attendance, the fourth event in Florence took place in July 52 at the Sala Bianca, a larger and more dramatic and more fitting setting within Palazzo Pitti. And against this dramatic backdrop, aglow with Murano glass chandeliers, the Florentine fashion shows were supported and monitored not just by the American diplomatic corps, but also Italian diplomatic circles. On July 18, 1952, a memo was circulated by the Commercial Office of the Italian Consul General to the United States. They sent the memo also to their governmental colleagues in Rome, including the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the National Institute of Foreign Commerce, and the Office of the Commercial Advisor within the Italian Embassy in Washington. The letter included a copy of an article about the recent Florence fashion shows from fashion industry newspaper Women's Wear Daily. And the memo stated, as a follow-up, please find attached an article in Women's Wear Daily relative to future fashion shows, in which are mentioned registered American buyers and representatives who are traveling to Europe for this occasion. So here we have a very clear example of Italian diplomatic circles not just noting, but circulating information about Giorgini's shows to the Italian wider diplomatic corps. A month later, on August 25th, 1952, the Italian consulate in Chicago wrote to Giorgini, underlining how the word had spread through Italian diplomatic circles in the US. He stated, "Dear Mr. Giorgini, my highest congratulations for the Florentine fashion show, which has had great resonance here. I hope that it has also led to good, solid business." In the next image, you see Claire Booth Luce, who in 1953 was appointed as the American ambassador to Italy. And this appointment demonstrated the interdependence of Italian fashion and international diplomacy. As the first American woman assigned to a major diplomatic post, Luce's appointment was known for generating a new kind of international attention. Her arrival in Rome resulted in a variety of dressmakers and fashion designers vying to dress her. In fact, she became embroiled in a regional dispute between Florence, home of Giorgini's fashion events, and Rome, who had its own couturiers and own agenda. Many of these designers emphatically, as we had heard, rejected Florence's claim to be Italy's fashion capital. And the Detroit Times reported on July 23rd that, quote, Ambassador Luce today found herself in the middle of an embarrassing fight between the designers of Rome and Florence for the title of Italy's fashion capital. Delegations from the rival fashion associations pleaded with the American embassy to be the umpire by sending Mrs. Luce to their showings this week. By her presence, they hoped to settle where Italy's fashion capital really is. But Mrs. Luce cannot show favoritism, and the American embassy neatly sidestepped the issue by scheduling Mrs. Luce to visit a textile factory, which sells fabrics to all the fashion houses of Italy. So this diplomatic skirmish, I think, demonstrates very effectively the perception of the American government as an Italian fashion industry referee. Investing the American ambassador with the role of arbiter in an Italian industry dispute suggests both the soft power legacy of the Marshall Plan and the market-shifting purchasing power of the American department stores. And I'll have the next image for a closing comment, which is that I'd like to close as I began with a reference to Los Angeles Times fashion editor Faye Hammond, which I think further strengthens the argument of the importance of fashion as a diplomatic tool. In 1955, Faye Hammond was awarded the Star of Solidarity by the Italian government. At the 1955 ceremony, which took place in Los Angeles, the award was presented by Vittorio Sanguetti, who at that time was the Italian Trade Commissioner, and Casilli d'Aragona, the Consul General of Italy, who thanked Hammond for, quote, an outstanding contribution to the knowledge, appreciation, and success of the Italian high fashion and Italian design among the American public, thus fostering the development of trade relations between the two countries. So a year later, in 1956, Hammond was presented with another award, the Golden Lily, in recognition of her significant contribution to Italian fashion. The award was presented to Hammond in the Sala Bianca, the space which was made synonymous with Italian fashion, thanks in part to the ambassadors and the diplomats who supported the vision of Giovanni Battista Giorgini. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Son, for your very interesting lecture. I hope we'll keep on investigating this particular aspect of Giorgini's activity together. And I hope to see you soon, maybe in Florence. Now I welcome Professor Luis André do Prado, University of São Paulo, Brazil. Thank you, Professor do Prado, for your patience, and thank you for being here with us. The title of the lecture is Influence and Presence of Italians in the Emergence of Fashion in Brazil, 1950-1960. Please, Professor, go ahead.
Thank you, Neri, and thank you to Daniela Calanca. It's a great pleasure to participate in this celebration. I'm grateful for the invitation to Archivo Giorgini and the Bologna University team. Well, it's important to explain that my lecture focuses on the initial part of my research about the theme that gives names to the lecture. No, precisely because I just started this research, but we will be advanced in the future. You have more to expose. I will make only indirect reference to Giorgini. Okay. Well, when we talk about Italian influence or presence in Brazilian fashion, it's necessary to keep in mind the contingent of immigrants who left Italy for different countries in the world between 19th and 20th centuries, time of the so-called Great Immigration. Being Brazil, according to the calculation of many historians, the 16 contingent received, but perhaps one of those who most received cultural influence alongside the USA and Argentina. During and after the Second World War, another important immigration flow occurred, and many of Italians who came here in that phase were intellectuals or artists who had expressive trajectories in many areas, such as theater, cinema, architecture, and why not, fashion. How fashion is our theme? Let's go to the point. One important and curious landmark in the history of Brazilian fashion happened by the initiative precisely of a couple of post-war Italian immigrants. I speak of Pietro Maria Bardi and Aquilina, or Lina nickname, Bobardi. Picture 1AB, please. He was a journalist and merchant, art dealer, and she was an architect. So it was on the initiative, like I said, of this couple that in November 6 of 1952, the first Brazilian fashion show was held in São Paulo Museu of Art, MASP, picture 2, please. I chose to focus on this event because it seemed to me opportune to draw a parallel with the first Italian high fashion show, which took place just a year and few months before. There is no record that Italian event influenced the Bardi couple, but it's possible to observe similarities in the purpose of both, such as a search for a nationally inspired fashion aesthetic capable of confronting the hegemony that France then maintained in the international field of fashion. But paths taken and the results obtained were very different. Let's look at the background. Bardi began his career in Italy as a journalist and gallery owner between 1920 and 1940, militating among the young followers of fascism for modern arts and in favor of rationalist architecture being the state's official art. He met Lina when he worked at Studio di Arte Palma in Rome. She also dedicated to modern architecture, but linked to the Italian left, having worked in the Italian Communist Party in 1943, in Modernist Domus magazine in 1944, collaborating with the famous designer and architect Gio Ponti. They married in 1946, already with plans to immigrate to Brazil. They thought to setting up art shows in Latin American countries. And in fact, they held the first one in the year of arrival in Rio de Janeiro. And there, in this first exposition, they met the Brazilian communication magnate Assis Chateaubriand, owner of Diários Associados, a kind of associated press, a complex with over 100 vehicles involving radios, newspapers, and Brazilian First TV channel, from whom they gained sympathy and trust. Thus, Chateaubriand invited the Bardi couple to support him in implementation and coordination of an art gallery that he had already planned to open in São Paulo City. The partnership worked and the gallery became to Museu de Arte de São Paulo, MASP, opened in November 1947, picture 3. Which one had Bardi as a curator until the 90s and today is one of the most important museums of South Hemisphere. MASP occupying in the early years the second floor of the building of the Diários Associados in São Paulo. And the financial support to Museu was always involved in the interaction of interests that Chateaubriand established with part of economic elite of Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo, a factor that could also motivate Bardi and Lina to create within the MASP in March 1951, the Institute of Contemporary Arte, IAC, or IAC in Portuguese, a pioneer free school in Brazil of industrial design and advertising, following the German's Bauhaus guidelines. So the IAC MASP advanced in its goals with the creation, in the same year, the Brazilian Fashion Studies Center, and in the Museu, a section of custom to compose a collection of old and contemporary costumes. Fact that gave origin of the first fashion show held by this institution in August 1951, picture 4. The fashion parade of ancient models which present pieces by Christian Dior, and the costume of the year 2045, designed picture 5, designed by Salvador Dali for the event. But let's go to the first Brazilian fashion show. In an article about the subject, Bardi said, the position of Brazilian fashion is apparently located in the following terms. Our best dressmakers, he refers here to Brazilian high fashion traders, They take a plane, disembark at Le Bourget, they cross Paris, send suitcase to the Palace Hotel, and run to look for Christian Dior, Jacques Spa, and other colleagues of the highest category. They examined the collections, by then transported them to Brazil, and electrified the ladies of our society, able to shell out the large sums. So that's fashion in Brazil. Well, what Bardi found at that time was there's no fashion creators in Brazil who assumed the authorship or of their creations, signed them, but only commercial house aimed at elites who imported fashion from Paris, or, on the other hand, attended to the medium class, seamstress or garment industries that copied or adapted foreign models, almost always in disaccord with local habits and climates. Just a minute. Well, it was to change this situation that the Center of Fashion Studies in IAC MASP started to work on the creation of a collection of customs that was legitimately Brazilian. To this, they used raw materials and printers that referred in Brazilian visuality, planning to show this collection to a wide audience. A model course was also set up in IAC, and the development of the Brazilian fashion collection was guided by another Italian couple, picture 6, AB. The artist Roberto Sambonet, who designed the models under guidance of his wife, Luisa, about whom information is scarce. They immigrated to Brazil in 1948, and in the following year, joined to the IAC MASP. Another curious aspect, industrial design course presupposed it was a fashion collection for industrial production, ready to wear. But that was not the case. Some textile industries appears as partners of the event. And the largest magazine store in São Paulo at that time, Mapping, picture 9 AB, appears too, but there was not mention to of the garment industries in the credits. These were, of course, unique pieces that were offered for sale after the show at mapping stores at medium price. 10 models was trained to parade the collection, pictures 10, 11, 12, among which only one was a black woman. The event took place in the Museo's Atelier, starting at 5 p.m., with free entrance for an audience of about 1,000 people. To create a fashion with Brazilian identity, the team designed models that would be suited to the local climate and geography, seeking aesthetics, reference of the original culture that emerged in the most exploited social layers of society, indigenous, Afro-Brazilians, and popular cultures of the different place of country. Pictures 13, 14, 15. Based in these guidelines, 50 costumes were created using woven and tropical fibers, leather imprinted, referenced in tropical, and flora, national flora. As was usual at that time, the costumes were named, inspired in local themes like Iguaçu, Porocás, Jacaré, Urubu, Cunhambebe, etc. from India, Indian language Tupi-Guarani, Macumba, Cuíca, Mãe de Santo, Afro-Brazilian words, or even regional in tropical terms like carambola, favela, jangada, pottery, balaio, etc. The repercussion in the media was great, with the support of the Diários Associados, picture 16 AB and 17. And the reports heralded a new era in Brazilian fashion, but that was not the case. As Bard himself recognized years later, the initiative was like a stone thrown into the water. It caused some ripples on the surface and then died. We understand that Sambonet and Bard's Brazilian fashion was conceived based in the avant-garde ideas, full of good intentions, but they were ideas out of the place and time. It's possible to identify in the way that the project was conceived ideological values of the time when Bardi was associated with fascism in Italy, when he defended precisely one art with an Italian identity that could have international recognition, objective also of the policies adopted by Mussolini's government, implanted in 1926 through the autarchies. IC MASP ended activities in December 1953, and the emergence of fashion designers in Brazil, using here concept from the French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu, happening in a very close time frame to these actions, but not in a target way that Bard wanted. They gradually conquered their space, presented his models in events to promotion the Brazilian cotton fabrics, starting with José Ronaldo in the mid-50s. Since of them, many other fashion creators have had their names or brands valued on a regional or national level, repeating Brazil in a small scale the elitist system of high fashion from Paris. All of them rejected or had difficulty adhering to Red Tour. Listing their names is less relevant here than pointing out the success of these dressmakers or costureiros, like we say in Brazil, was not due to speech or aesthetic aspects in favor of a fashion with Brazilian identity. On the contrary, the pioneer José Ronaldo said about Brazilian identity in fashion, in the strict sense of the word, here's my support. Nothing, however, the statement that inspiration may be French without, however, reduce our work as an artist. Denner Pamplona de Abreu, who achieved great fame in Brazil fashion in 60s, fame compared to Pelé internally, followed the same path when he said, in fashion, the great creative center is and will always be Paris. Among the fashion designers or menswear tailors who gained recognition in Brazil in 60s, Many were Italians or descendants of Italians. Also at the events that took place at the National Textile Industry Fair, FENIT, a center for dissemination of fashion in Brazil in that time, the presence of Italian soft power was expressive, which certainly derived from the recognition by Italian fashion after the first Italian fashion show carried by Count Giorgini. A proof of this, we can mention the Italian fashion show with Brazilian fabrics, picture 18, 19, and 20, held at the 5 FENIT in August 1960, which brought to Brazil Emílio Pucci, Valentino, Sorelli Fontana, Bic, Patrick de Berency, Brioni, and Clara Centinaro. Centinaro had then, like designer, the Roman Ugo Castellana, picture 21, 22, and 23, disciple of Emílio Schubert, who decided to stay in Brazil and develop here a relevant career for decades. He has now 92 years old, a friend of mine, and a precious source about that time. To get an idea of the extent of the influence of the Italian fashion, only at FENIT in 60, it's enough to note that among 33 foreign fashion stylists invited to show collections at the event, 15 were Italians. But this is another history. Thank you all for attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Do Prado, very interesting. So, with your lecture, we have finished our conference. I thank everybody, I thank the audience, all our kind lecturers, our sponsors, and I want to say that the conference will be available and visible on YouTube, and all our next projects will be announced on Facebook, and all the lectures will be published by University of Bologna on Zone Moda Journal, and so you will find them on the internet soon. Thank you again, and have a nice evening.